The tribe threw the blind Apache woman out until the rancher swore, "I will be your eyes." The sun had barely risen over the red hills of the Apache reservation when Ayanna opened her eyes, or rather, reached for the world she could not see. Though the light of day streamed across the desert, she knew it only by feel, smell, and sound. The soft rustle of wind through dry sagebrush, the distant caw of a crow, the crunch of the sand beneath her feet, these were her markers, her guideposts in a world she could not see. She had been blind since birth, and though she had learned much about navigating the world without sight, every day brought new challenges. Her life on the reservation had never been easy. The other villagers often looked at her with a mixture of pity and irritation. Some would speak loudly, thinking it helpful, while others would ignore her entirely, as though she were invisible. From a young age, Ayanna learned to rely on herself. She learned how to identify plants by their texture, how to hear the movements of animals approaching, and how to memorize the paths she walked. Despite all this, the whispers followed her wherever she went, the hushed comments about how she could not contribute, how she burdened the tribe, how she was different. Ayanna's parents had died when she was a child, leaving her with only distant relatives to care for her. Some of them were kind, some indifferent, but no matter the warmth she received, she always felt the eyes of the tribe watching, judging, and measuring her every action. She had grown used to it, finding comfort in small routines, fetching water from the well, listening to the elders tell stories, helping with small chores that did not require sight. It was not much, but it was her life, and she had learned to find joy where she could. On this particular morning, Ayanna's routine was interrupted. The village elders had called a meeting, and there was tension in the air. She could hear the raised voices from a distance, the thud of feet as the elders moved, the nervous whispers of other villagers. Something felt different. She did not know what it was yet, but a cold fear crept into her heart. When she arrived near the meeting area, she could sense the sharpness in the voices. The elders were speaking in a tone she had never heard directed at her before, firm, harsh, final. Her heart pounded. The words she could not see came to her through the vibrations in the ground, the inflection in the voices. They were discussing her, deciding her fate. Her mind raced, trying to anticipate, trying to reason with them even before they spoke. The elder with the gravelly voice spoke first. "She cannot live among us," he said. "She slows us down. She cannot see the dangers of the land. She cannot contribute in the way we need." Another elder added, "We have done all we can." "She is strong, yes, but her strength is not enough. She is a burden we cannot carry forever." Ayanna felt the weight of the words like stones pressing on her chest. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but the words froze. There was nothing she could say to change their minds. She had spent her entire life proving herself, and yet, in a single moment, the tribe she had called family declared that she was no longer welcome. The elders continued, speaking of exile, of survival on her own, of leaving the safety of the community behind. Ayanna's knees trembled. She thought of the harsh desert beyond the village, of the wide stretches of sand and rock where every step could be dangerous. She thought of the rattlesnakes hidden under stones, of the coyotes that roamed at night, of the scorching heat of the midday sun. Yet even in her fear, she felt a spark of determination. She would not allow despair to consume her. She had survived blindness all her life. She could survive this too. When the villagers dispersed, some in sympathy and some in discomfort, Ayanna remained rooted to the spot. She could feel the silence that followed, the tension that hung in the air. Slowly, with steadying breath, she turned away from the village and began walking into the unknown. Each step was careful, deliberate. She ran her hands along the rocks and shrubs to sense her path, listened intently for signs of water or shelter, and memorized the contours of the land through touch and sound. The first night in the desert was the hardest. The cold seeped into her bones, and the strange sounds of the night made her heart race. She could hear the distant howl of wolves, the scuttle of small creatures through the brush, the wind that whipped across the sand with an almost painful intensity. She found a small overhang in the rocks, curled herself up as best she could, and tried to sleep. Hunger and exhaustion gnawed at her, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic, she knew, would be far more dangerous than any wild animal. The days that followed were a mixture of struggle and adaptation. Yana learned to follow the sound of a distant stream, to taste water cautiously, to move silently so as not to draw attention from predators. She began to notice patterns in the desert, where the wind blew, which paths led to shade, which plants were safe to eat. Her senses sharpened, her mind became her eyes. Despite the difficulty, she discovered a resilience she had not known existed. Every challenge she overcame became a small victory, and these victories strengthened her spirit. But loneliness was her constant companion. There were no voices to comfort her, no hands to guide her. She missed the laughter of the children in the village, the low hum of the elders' chants, the warmth of someone simply acknowledging her presence. The exile had not only thrown her into the wilderness, it had cast her into isolation, testing her in ways she had never imagined. Yet even in the silence, Ayana's heart held on to hope. She imagined a life beyond mere survival, a life where she could find companionship, safety, and understanding. She reminded herself of the stories her parents had told her, of the Apache spirits that watched over those who were brave, and of the inner strength that had carried her through blindness all her life. With each passing day, she moved forward, guided by intuition, courage, and the memory of love that had shaped her earliest years. By the end of the first week, Ayana had learned much about the desert and herself. She could locate edible plants, recognize the sounds of approaching animals, and find shelter in places that would have once terrified her. Each night, she whispered to herself, promising that she would not give up, that she would not be defeated by fear or rejection. Her exile had been cruel, but it had also forced her to discover the depth of her own strength. And then, one morning, as the sun cast its first golden rays across the hills, a new sound reached her ears, a gentle human sound, unlike the wind or the animals. Footsteps. Soft, careful, approaching. Ayana froze, heart pounding. For the first time since her exile, she was not entirely alone. She could not see who it was, but she could sense that this presence carried neither threat nor malice. Something inside her whispered that this encounter might change everything. Little did she know, her life was about to take an unexpected turn. In the vast emptiness of the desert, where rejection had once seemed absolute, she was about to meet someone who would become her guide, her friend, and perhaps her eyes in a world she had always navigated by touch and sound. And so, Ayana's journey continued, not just a journey of survival, but a journey of courage, resilience, and the quiet hope that even in the harshest exile, kindness could still be found. The first morning after hearing the sound of human footsteps, Ayana felt a mixture of curiosity and caution. She had survived alone in the desert for over a week, learning its rhythms and dangers. Yet now, the presence of another human being brought a new kind of tension. Every instinct told her to hide, to avoid possible danger, but another part of her, a quiet, persistent hope, urged her to meet this stranger. She carefully moved toward the sound, listening to the pattern of the steps. They were deliberate, slow, and careful, almost as if the person was searching for something or someone. Ayana's heart beat faster. She could sense kindness in the rhythm, a gentleness she had not felt from anyone in the tribe for years. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out from the cover of the rocks, calling out softly, "Hello, I'm here." The footsteps paused. A deep, calm voice replied, "Hello there, are you alone?" Yana's voice trembled, but she answered truthfully, "Yes, I am alone." There was a brief silence, and then the voice spoke again, this time closer. "Don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you." Yana felt the stranger's presence growing nearer. His steps were steady, confident, yet careful enough not to startle her. Finally, she felt a warm hand lightly touch her shoulder. She flinched instinctively but did not pull away. "My name is John," he said. "I live on a ranch not far from here. I saw you wandering and I wanted to make sure you're safe." Yana hesitated. She had been abandoned by her own people and had survived on her own. Could she trust someone who had just appeared in the desert? Yet there was something about John's voice, a quiet strength, a lack of judgment that made her want to believe him. I'm Ayana," she whispered. I've been cast out. I have nowhere to go." John's voice softened. "You're not alone anymore, Ayana. I will help you. You don't have to face this desert by yourself." Tears welled up in Ayana's eyes, though no one could see them. For the first time since her exile, she felt a small spark of hope. She nodded, though John could not see it, and allowed him to guide her toward his ranch. His hand was steady and reassuring as he led her through the uneven terrain. With each step, she felt less fear and more trust. The ranch was a large, open space surrounded by fences, fields, and barns. The scent of animals, hay, and earth filled the air. John guided Ayana carefully, describing everything around her so she could begin to understand the world she could not see. "To your left," he said, "there's the barn. It smells of hay and horses. To your right, there's the corral where the cows are grazing." Yana listened closely, soaking in the details. She felt a sense of wonder she hadn't experienced in months. The ranch was vast and alive, full of sounds, textures, and smells. She realized that with John's help, she could learn to navigate it, just as she had navigated the desert. Once inside the house, John offered her food and water. She sat at the table, hands tracing the smooth surface as she drank. John watched her carefully, understanding that she needed both physical and emotional support. "You've been through a lot," he said gently, "but I promise, Ayana, you're not alone anymore. I will help you see the world in a new way. I will be your eyes." The words surprised her. Nobody had ever said anything like that to her before. The tribe had treated her as though she were invisible, incapable, and unwanted. Here was a man who not only offered help, but also promised to guide her, to be her companion. Her heart swelled with gratitude, though she still felt nervous about relying on someone so completely. Over the next few days, John began teaching Ayana how to navigate the ranch safely. He helped her learn the positions of objects, the locations of the animals, and the boundaries of the land. He guided her through the fields, describing the color of the flowers she could not see, the movements of the cattle, and the sounds of the wind as it passed through the trees. Ayana listened carefully, memorizing every detail. She began to recognize the rhythm of the ranch, the creak of the barn doors, the low moo of the cows, the soft steps of John walking beside her. Slowly, she started to feel a sense of independence again, though always with John nearby as her guide. During their walks, they talked. Ayana told John about her life in the tribe, about the challenges she faced growing up blind, and about the pain of being cast out. John listened without interruption, without judgment. He shared stories of his own life, of growing up on the ranch, of learning the value of hard work, and of the quiet satisfaction he found in helping others. The two began to form a bond built on trust, respect, and shared stories. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, John said something that Ayana would never forget. "Ayana, the world can be cruel, yes. People can be unkind. But there is also kindness and there is hope. You have strength that most people will never understand. Let me help you see that strength reflected in the world around you." Ayana smiled, though John could not see it. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not with eyes but with understanding. She realized that her blindness did not define her. Her courage, her resilience, and her heart did. And now, with John's guidance, she could begin to experience the world in a new way, confident that she was not alone. The days turned into weeks. Yana grew more comfortable at the ranch. She learned the sounds of the animals so well that she could tell which cow needed attention, which horse was restless, and which dog had come to greet her. She learned to navigate the fields independently, using John's instructions and the sharpness of her other senses. Each small victory brought her confidence, and with it, a sense of joy she had not felt since childhood. Yet even as she adapted, she never forgot the pain of rejection. Sometimes, the memories of the tribe's harsh words and the loneliness of exile would creep into her thoughts. During those moments, John's presence was her anchor. "Remember," he would say, "I am your eyes. I will help you see what the world can offer. You are not alone." Through this care and companionship, Ayanna began to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. She realized that life was still full of possibilities. The desert, once a symbol of fear and isolation, had led her to this place, to this man, and to the chance to rebuild her life. She discovered a courage she had never known she possessed, a determination to thrive, and a belief that she could create a life full of meaning, even after being cast out by those who were supposed to protect her. John, too, learned from Ayanna. He discovered a new depth of patience and understanding. He learned to communicate more carefully, to notice subtleties in sound and movement, and to see the world not just with his eyes, but with his heart. Together, they formed a partnership, a friendship built on trust, respect, and the shared understanding that even in a world that could be harsh, kindness could make all the difference. One afternoon, as Ayanna sat on the porch listening to the wind rustling through the trees, she reflected on how far she had come. She had faced rejection, danger, and despair, yet she was alive. She had found a friend, a guide, and a companion in John. And she had learned that her blindness, while challenging, did not prevent her from experiencing the richness of life. In that moment, Ayanna made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to learn, to grow, and to live fully. She would not allow the cruelty of others to define her, and she would embrace the kindness she had been shown, sharing it whenever she could. She knew that life would still hold challenges, but with courage, resilience, and the support of those who truly cared, she could overcome them all. And so, under the wide sky and the warm sun of the Apache lands, a new chapter of Ayanna's life began, one of hope, guidance, and the promise that even in the darkest moments, a compassionate hand could help her find her way. John had become her eyes, but more importantly, he had become a symbol of the good that still existed in the world. And for the first time since her exile, Ayanna felt that she truly belonged somewhere. Life at the ranch was unlike anything Ayanna had ever known. The desert, which had once been harsh and unforgiving, now felt like a teacher, preparing her for this new chapter. With John's guidance, she began to understand the rhythms and routines of the ranch. Every day brought new lessons, challenges, and small victories that built her confidence. The mornings began early. Before the sun had fully risen, John would wake Ayanna with a gentle voice. "It's time to check on the animals," he would say. At first, the sound of her own footsteps on the dirt paths was uncertain, tentative. But John was always nearby, describing each step, each obstacle. "To your left, the barn door. A few more steps, careful, there's a small rock in the path. Now straight ahead." Ayanna followed, feeling her way, memorizing every contour of the land. Inside the barn, the scents were strong and alive. Horses shifted their weight, snorting softly, the hay crackled underfoot, and the smell of animals was rich and earthy. Ayanna learned to identify each animal by sound and touch. She learned that the stall nearest the entrance was for a gentle mare named Luma. Her hooves tapped rhythmically on the wooden floor. Ayanna reached out, feeling the warmth of the animal's coat and the strong muscles beneath. John watched quietly, knowing she was building a connection not just with the animal, but with life itself. Each task was a lesson in independence. She learned to feed the animals, to pour water carefully without spilling, to notice subtle changes in behavior. A cow that moved restlessly might be hungry, A horse that pawed at the ground might want attention. John explained patiently, and Ayanna listened intently, memorizing the lessons with a focus that only someone who relied on senses beyond sight could master. Outside, the field stretched wide, filled with rows of crops and open spaces where cattle grazed. Ayanna learned to navigate the open land using sounds and smells. The wind carried the scent of soil, hay, and flowers. Birds provided signals of movement. Even the tiniest change, a branch brushing against another, a distant footstep, could tell her what was happening. Over time, she walked with more confidence, moving independently while John remained nearby, his presence a safety net rather than a tether. The routine of the ranch became familiar, almost comforting, but life was not only about chores. John encouraged Ayanna to explore her other talents. He had noticed that she had a remarkable memory and a keen understanding of the world around her. He would ask her to recount the paths they had taken, describe the animals, or identify objects by touch. Ayanna excelled. She found that she could sense details others might overlook, patterns in the wind, changes in the soil, even subtle shifts in the behavior of animals. Her mind became her eyes, sharper than ever. As the days passed, Ayanna also began to teach John about her own knowledge. She shared stories from the Apache traditions, about the land, the seasons, and the lessons taught by her elders. She spoke of the spiritual connection between people and nature, of the respect for life that had been instilled in her from childhood. John listened with fascination, realizing that though she could not see, Ayanna had a perspective and wisdom that he had never encountered before. Their lessons became mutual. He taught her the ways of the ranch. She taught him to see the world differently, through understanding, patience, and deep attention. Evenings were often spent on the porch, listening to the sounds of the ranch as the sun set. The wind softened, the animals quieted, and the sky turned dark and full of stars. Ayanna would close her eyes and absorb every sound. She could hear the distant owls, the faint rustle of small animals, the gentle murmur of a stream nearby. John would sit beside her, occasionally describing the beauty of the sky, the colors fading from pink to orange to deep purple. Ayanna would imagine it in her mind, painting pictures with words and sound. Through these routines, Ayanna began to feel a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. On the reservation, she had been limited by fear, exclusion, and the judgment of others. Here, at the ranch, she could move, learn, and explore without restriction. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, strengthened her belief in herself. She could walk across the yard without help. She could lead a horse to water. She could describe the sounds of the land with a clarity that astonished even John. Yet life was not without challenges. There were moments of frustration when she stumbled, misjudged a step, or accidentally startled an animal. At times, the weight of her past rejection would press down on her, and she would feel small and vulnerable once more. But John was always there, steady and patient. "Mistakes are part of learning," he would say. "Even I make them. The important thing is to keep going." His support allowed her to take risks, to push herself, and to learn that failure was simply another path to growth. One day, John brought Ayanna to the edge of a large pasture. "Today," he said, "I want you to try leading the cattle on your own. I will follow, but I won't guide you step by step. Trust yourself." Ayanna's heart pounded. The cattle were large, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous, but she nodded, taking a deep breath. She listened to their movements, felt the vibrations in the ground, and spoke gently to them, using her voice to guide and reassure. Slowly, carefully, she led them across the field, keeping her focus on sound, touch, and instinct. John followed a few steps behind, ready to intervene if needed, but she did not need him. The moment she realized she had succeeded alone, a wave of triumph and joy washed over her. It was in these moments that Ayanna began to truly understand the promise John had made, that he would be her eyes. not by doing everything for her, but by guiding her, teaching her, and giving her the confidence to see the world in her own way. She realized that independence did not mean isolation. It meant learning, trusting, and growing with support. Ayanna also began to form connections with the animals that lived on the ranch. She discovered that she could sense their moods and needs in ways others often missed. The horses responded to her touch and voice. The cows followed her calmly, and even the dogs seemed to recognize her presence as gentle and trustworthy. Each connection reminded her that communication went beyond sight, and that understanding and empathy could create bonds stronger than any physical vision. Over time, Ayanna began to share more of herself with John. She spoke of the pain of being rejected, the loneliness she had endured, and the fear that had accompanied her exile. John listened without interruption, offering not pity, but understanding and encouragement. "You are not defined by what others say or do," he said. "You are defined by how you respond, by your courage and your heart, and you have both in abundance." These words became a foundation for her growth. Ayanna realized that while the world could be harsh, it could also be kind. She had faced despair and emerged stronger, guided not only by her own resilience but by the care and respect of someone who believed in her. The ranch, with its open fields, animals, and gentle routines, became a place of healing, growth, and possibility. As weeks turned into months, Ayanna became more adept at life on the ranch. She could complete most tasks independently, yet she never hesitated to accept John's guidance when needed. She learned to read the subtle cues of the land, the way the wind shifted before a storm, the faint sound of distant water, the changes in animal behavior. Her senses became sharper, her confidence grew, and her fear of the world outside the reservation began to fade. In quiet moments, Ayanna reflected on her journey. From the rejection of the tribe to the harshness of the desert, she had endured and survived. She had discovered courage she had never known, and she had learned to trust in herself and in others. John had become more than a guide. He was a friend, a teacher, and a witness to her strength. And she, in turn, had begun to teach him lessons of patience, empathy, and the remarkable power of human resilience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky filled with stars, Ayanna felt a profound sense of peace. The fear and loneliness of her exile seemed distant now, replaced by a life full of purpose, learning, and connection. She had not only survived, she had thrived. And in that moment, she understood that the true measure of vision was not the eyes, but the heart. And so, on the ranch where every day brought lessons and growth, Ayanna continued her journey, not just as a blind woman learning to navigate the world, but as someone discovering her strength, her independence, and the limitless possibilities that awaited her. She had been cast out, yet she had found a new life, one full of hope, friendship, and the quiet certainty that she could face any challenge with courage and grace. Word traveled slowly at first, carried by whispers and cautious voices. But eventually, the elders of the tribe heard about Ayanna's survival. The story of the blind woman cast out into the desert had spread like wind across the hills. She had not only survived, but she had found a man who cared for her, a place to live, and a way to thrive. Some of the villagers were curious, some ashamed, and some unsettled. How could the girl they had rejected continue to live, strong and unbroken? The elders, whose decision to exile her had once seemed final, felt a stirring of doubt. They had acted out of fear and convention, but now the consequences of their choice became clear. Ayanna, blind and cast out, had not perished. Instead, she had adapted, learned, and flourished. It was a revelation that shook the tribe's perception of what strength and resilience truly meant. One afternoon, a small group of elders and a few villagers made their way to John's ranch. They approached cautiously, unsure of what they would find. The wide fields and the open sky of the ranch were unfamiliar, and the smells and sounds of animals filled the air. They called out hesitantly, unsure if Ayanna would answer. "Yana, are you there?" an elder shouted. Yana heard the voices immediately. Her heart leapt, and for a moment old fears resurfaced. These were the people who had turned their backs on her, who had decided she was no longer welcome. Yet, something within her had changed. She was no longer the frightened, powerless woman who had wandered into the desert weeks ago. She was strong, capable, and guided by both her own confidence and John's support. John stepped forward before Ayanna could speak. His voice was calm but firm. "I am John, and this is Ayanna. She is safe here. I hope you come in peace." The elders hesitated. Some avoided eye contact while others shifted nervously, uncertain how to respond. Finally, one of the senior elders spoke. We heard that you survived, that you are well, that you are not alone." His words faltered, heavy with guilt and confusion. Ayanna took a deep breath. She could feel the tension in the air, the mixture of fear, shame, and curiosity. She raised her voice, clear and steady, determined to be heard. "Yes, I am alive. I have not perished. I have found help, and I have learned to live in ways you may not understand. I am not weak. I am not a burden. I am still part of this world, even if you once thought otherwise." The elders listened, some shifting uncomfortably. A few of the villagers murmured among themselves, recognizing the truth in her words. Yana continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I have faced danger, fear, and loneliness. I have learned to trust in myself and in those who show kindness. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am simply asking for recognition of who I am." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, the tribe saw Ayanna not as a helpless blind woman, but as someone who had endured hardship and emerged stronger. They saw courage in her voice, dignity in her stance, and wisdom in her words. John remained by her side, silently supporting her presence. Though he could see her struggles with the tribe, he knew she did not need him to speak for her. She was fully capable of expressing her truth. His role was to provide safety, guidance, and assurance that she was not alone in facing this confrontation. The conversation that followed was tentative but meaningful. The elders asked questions: how she had survived, how she had learned to care for the animals, and how she had managed to live in a world that many believed would overwhelm her. Yana answered patiently, describing the skills she had developed, the lessons she had learned, and the support she had received from John. She did not speak with anger or bitterness, but with clarity and strength. Some of the villagers began to nod, their initial hesitation replaced by admiration. They realized that Ayanna's survival was not a matter of luck or outside intervention alone. It was a testament to her courage, intelligence, and determination. Even those who had once doubted her began to see the error of their ways, understanding that exclusion had been a mistake, and that kindness and understanding could achieve what fear and judgment never could. As the conversation continued, a subtle shift occurred. The elders' voices softened, and the tension in the air lifted slightly. They were beginning to recognize that Ayanna's experience had value beyond mere survival. She had learned resilience, self-reliance, and the importance of compassion. Her journey was a lesson not just for her but for the entire tribe. Ayanna also spoke of the lessons she had learned from John. She described how he had guided her, supported her, and taught her to see the world in a new way. "He has been my eyes," she said. "He has helped me learn to trust again, to live independently, and to understand that kindness is more powerful than fear." The elders were silent for a moment, reflecting on the weight of her words. They had acted out of fear and tradition, but Ayanna had shown them a different path. They realized that guidance, patience, and compassion could create strength where they had once only seen weakness. One elder, the same who had first spoken, stepped forward. His voice was quiet but sincere. "Yana, we were wrong to cast you out. We did not understand your strength, and we see now that our fear blinded us. We cannot undo the past, but we can acknowledge your courage and the life you have built." Yana nodded. Forgiveness was not her goal, but recognition of her journey felt meaningful. She realized that the tribe's acknowledgement, even if belated, was a step toward healing, for herself, for them, and for the bonds that could be rebuilt. The villagers began to ask more questions, curious about the ranch, the animals, and the lessons Yana had learned. She shared her experiences, describing the daily routines, the sounds of the animals, and the ways she had adapted to a world without sight. John added details when necessary, but he allowed Ayanna to remain at the center, her voice and perspective guiding the conversation. By the end of the day, the atmosphere had changed. Where there had been tension and fear, there was now curiosity and respect. The tribe began to see Ayanna not as someone to pity, but as someone to admire and learn from. Her journey became a living example of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of empathy. In the days that followed, some members of the tribe visited the ranch again, bringing questions and seeking guidance. Ayanna welcomed them, sharing her knowledge of survival, animals, and the land. She taught them how to listen to nature, how to sense danger, and how to approach life with patience and care. John supported her quietly, ensuring that the interactions were safe and productive, but allowing Ayanna to lead. The experience was healing for both Ayanna and the tribe. For Ayanna, it was a chance to reclaim her place in a community that had once rejected her. For the tribe, it was a lesson in humility, compassion, and the understanding that strength can take many forms. The bond between them began to grow, no longer defined by fear or judgment, but by mutual respect and shared learning. Through this process, Ayanna discovered something profound. True strength was not just surviving alone, but surviving and then using that experience to teach, guide, and inspire others. She realized that her journey through exile, hardship, and fear had prepared her not only to live independently, but also to become a source of wisdom and courage for others. By the time the elders and villagers left the ranch, the air was lighter. There was still work to be done, healing to continue, and understanding to grow. But the first steps had been taken. Ayanna had faced those who had once rejected her, and she had done so with dignity, clarity, and courage. She had shown them the person she truly was, a woman strong in spirit, resilient in action, and guided by kindness and wisdom. And as the sun set over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields and painting the sky in warm colors, Ayanna felt a sense of calm. She had survived exile, faced fear, and reclaimed her place in a world that once seemed unforgiving. She had learned that compassion could overcome rejection, that understanding could replace judgment, and that courage could illuminate even the darkest moments. In that quiet evening with John beside her and the echoes of the tribe's voices fading into the distance, Ayanna knew that her life had changed forever. She had not only survived, she had thrived. She had not only healed, she had inspired. And she had not only regained trust in others, she had reclaimed her own sense of strength, independence, and purpose. The journey of confrontation and healing had begun, and with it, a new chapter of Ayanna's life was opening, a chapter filled with hope, connection, and the promise that courage and kindness could transform even the most difficult past. Life after the confrontation with the tribe was different, but in the most hopeful ways. Ayanna woke each morning with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. The fear and loneliness that had once weighed heavily on her heart were gradually replaced by confidence, connection, and the knowledge that she was capable of more than anyone, including herself, had imagined. The ranch had become her home, but it was more than that. It was a place of learning, growth, and discovery. Each day, she worked alongside John, tending to the animals, caring for the crops, and navigating the land with a confidence that had taken weeks to build. She had developed a deep bond with the animals, recognizing their moods, habits, and needs in ways that others often overlooked. Each interaction strengthened her understanding of the world and reinforced the sense of independence she had fought so hard to regain. But Ayana's journey was no longer limited to the ranch. The visits from members of her tribe had sparked something within her. She realized that her story could serve as an example for others, proof that challenges, even those as harsh as exile or rejection, could be overcome with courage, resilience, and kindness. She began to consider ways she could share what she had learned to help those who faced fear, disability, or doubt in their own lives. With John's support, she began to organize small gatherings at the ranch. Villagers and even children from the tribe came to hear her stories, to learn about survival, and to understand how someone could live fully without sight. She described the techniques she had developed, using sound, touch, and memory to navigate the land, understanding animals through their movements, and sensing danger before it arrived. She explained how patience, observation, and courage could help anyone overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The children were particularly inspired. Many had never considered that someone who was blind could accomplish so much. They listened intently as she described the desert, the animals, and her journey of learning to survive alone. Jana's voice carried authority and warmth, a balance that made each story both informative and deeply moving. Her tales were not just about survival, they were about strength, perseverance, and the value of believing in oneself. Over time, Ayana became a bridge between the tribe and the outside world. She worked to build understanding and respect, teaching the young and reminding the elders of the importance of empathy and inclusion. She encouraged the tribe to see that strength is not always measured by what one can physically do, but by courage, adaptability, and the willingness to face fear and hardship. Her own life had become the ultimate lesson. John remained by her side throughout this journey, offering guidance and support, but never overshadowing her voice. He had promised to be her eyes, and in many ways he fulfilled that promise, not by doing things for her, but by helping her navigate the world while she discovered her own abilities. Together they became a team, their bond rooted in trust, respect, and the shared goal of learning and teaching. The tribe, too, began to change. Where once there had been fear and judgment, there was now respect and admiration. The elders started to recognize that their earlier decisions had been influenced by misunderstanding and prejudice, and they worked quietly to mend relationships. Villagers who had been skeptical at first began to participate in Ayana's gatherings, eager to learn from her experience. Slowly, she was welcomed back not as someone who had been cast out, but as a respected teacher and example of resilience. Yana herself felt a profound shift. No longer defined by her blindness or by the rejection she had once endured, she embraced her abilities and her purpose fully. She found joy in guiding others, in sharing knowledge, and in seeing the tangible impact of her lessons. Children learned how to move safely and confidently, even without sight. Adults discovered the importance of patience and observation, and the tribe as a whole began to value compassion and understanding more than rigid tradition. One day, as she walked across the ranch, Ayana paused to listen to the sounds of the land, the low murmur of the cows, the distant call of a hawk, the rustling of leaves in the wind. She felt a profound sense of connection. The desert that had once seemed threatening now felt like part of her story, a reminder of the strength she had gained and the journey she had completed. She realized that life was not about avoiding challenges, but about facing them with courage and learning from every experience. John approached her quietly, sensing the deep reflection in her posture. "You've come so far," he said softly. "You've taken what was meant to break you and turned it into something incredible. You've taught all of us something we will never forget." Gianna smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "You were my eyes when I needed them, but now I see in my own way. I understand the world differently, and I hope I can help others see it too." Her words reflected the truth of her journey. Sight was not the only way to understand the world. Strength, courage, empathy, and resilience were forms of vision just as important. She had learned to navigate life through senses other than sight, to rely on her mind and heart, and to face every challenge with determination. And now, she wanted to share that vision with as many people as possible. As months passed, Ayana's reputation grew. People from neighboring communities visited the ranch, drawn by stories of the blind woman who had survived exile, learned to live independently, and become a teacher. They came to learn practical skills, to hear her story, and to witness the transformation that kindness, patience, and courage could bring. Ayana welcomed them all, teaching with a mix of wisdom, patience, and warmth that left a lasting impression. The tribe's children, in particular, found inspiration in her presence. Some of them faced challenges of their own, physical disabilities, learning difficulties, or simply fear of failure. Seeing Ayana navigate life with confidence and determination gave them courage. They learned that obstacles were not the end of the road, but stepping stones to growth. They realized that everyone has unique strengths, and that support and understanding can unlock abilities they never knew they had. Ayana also began documenting her experiences. She shared stories of her childhood, her exile, her survival in the desert, and the lessons she had learned at the ranch. She included practical advice for living independently, techniques for understanding animals, and ways to navigate the environment without sight. Her writing and storytelling became a resource for others, a guide for those facing challenges, and a testament to the power of resilience and courage. Through all of this, John remained a constant presence. He had started as a guide, promising to be her eyes, but he had become a partner in every sense, someone who believed in her, supported her growth, and celebrated her victories. Together, they showed that trust, respect, and mutual support could create remarkable outcomes, even in the face of adversity. One afternoon, as Ayana looked out across the fields of the ranch, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the day she had been cast out, the fear and despair that had gripped her heart, and the long nights in the desert where every sound carried potential danger. She thought of the lessons she had learned, the skills she had developed, and the people who had believed in her. Most of all, she thought of how far she had come, not just in surviving, but in living fully, purposefully, and courageously. In that moment, Ayana realized that her life had taken on a meaning far greater than she had ever imagined. She was no longer simply a woman who had been cast out. She was a teacher, a guide, and a source of inspiration. She had discovered that true vision comes not from sight alone, but from the heart, the mind, and the courage to face life's challenges with determination and grace. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple, Ayana stood beside John, listening to the sounds of the land she had come to know so intimately. She felt a sense of peace, accomplishment, and joy. She had faced rejection, fear, and hardship, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than ever before. Her journey had taught her that resilience, kindness, and courage could transform even the most difficult circumstances. And so, Ayana continued her life at the ranch, not as a blind woman defined by her disability or by the mistakes of others, but as a symbol of hope, strength, and inspiration. She helped her tribe, guided those in need, and shared her story with anyone willing to listen. She showed that even in the face of rejection and hardship, a determined heart and a courageous spirit could create a life full of purpose, joy, and connection. Her story became a living legacy, a reminder to the tribe, to neighboring communities, and to anyone who heard her tale that every person has value, every life has meaning, and every challenge can be overcome with courage, resilience, and the support of those who believe in you. And under the wide, open sky of the Apache lands, with the gentle sounds of the ranch around her and the presence of a friend who had believed in her from the beginning, Ayana knew that she had found her place in the world. She had survived, she had healed, and she had inspired. She had turned exile into opportunity, fear into courage, and rejection into a life of hope and purpose. The journey that had begun with despair had ended in triumph, not because the world had changed, but because she had discovered the strength to change herself and the courage to help others see the possibilities within their own lives. Yana's life was no longer defined by blindness, rejection, or fear. It was defined by resilience, compassion, and the unshakable belief that even in the darkest moments, hope can guide the way.